In this video, I attempt the impossible. I plan on surviving 100 days in hardcore Minecraft, but there's a twist. I'm playing with over 200 mods installed, some of which increase the difficulty of every single enemy and add new enemies. There are new locations and challenges to be faced. This is a completely custom mod pack, made by me. I'm unfamiliar with most of these mods, so I'll be going in mostly blind. This is my 7th attempt at this. The furthest that I've gotten so far is 10 days. Yes, it is that difficult. Will I survive longer than that? Will I make it to 100 days? Or will I walk away from this challenge with my tail between my legs? Before we get started, I just wanted to say this project was a labor of love. I put hundreds of hours into it, so if you enjoy this kind of content, I would greatly appreciate it if you liked the video to help the algorithm get the video out to more people. If we get to 100 likes on this video, I'll release 200 days in ultra modded Minecraft. Now that that's out of the way, let's jump into the new world. We spawn in on day 0. I decided to spawn as a human, even though my skin doesn't really reflect it. I've tried a few of the other races, but none really seemed to fit me. I chose Blacksmith as my class, as I thought it would be a fun way to roleplay, and it would help me survive a little bit. I started by chopping down some trees, and continued to move on. I found some weird caves, but decided not to explore much further without any additional gear. While walking around, I discovered a pillager outpost. It had a much larger building next to it. I decided that I would try to conquer it a little bit later on. I took a moment to appreciate the birds and continued to explore. I was weary of the outpost, so I snuck around it. There were a bunch of these weird yellow cows. I'm assuming they're from the mod that adds the mob vote mobs. I came upon a village. They seemed friendly and surprisingly well guarded. I tried to trade this guy some sticks, but I'm bad at math. In the distance, I saw a fortress. It was larger than the one I saw before. I didn't know this at the time, but it was full of pillagers. I crossed the river, not knowing that it was actually full of electric eels. Fortunately, none of them seemed to notice, but this group of zombies did. I quickly found out that this pack has tree felling in it, which would save me a lot of time later on. I approached the fortress, but I saw the pillagers in the distance and decided to nope out of there. Night was approaching, so I made a bed and slept, which brings us to day 1. On day 1, I made another axe because I was getting annoyed at the warning message that kept showing up on my screen. Don't worry though, I fixed this later on. I continued to chop down trees for a while, because I wanted to build my base in this area, because it was really close to the village and the pillager fortress, and there was also lots of bees nearby. I started mining for the first time, which is something I do a lot in these first few days. Don't worry, it gets more exciting in a bit. The immersive first-person view looks a little strange when you have a torch in your offhand. I gathered a stack or two of cobblestone so I could begin working on my new house. I tried to record a time-lapse, but unfortunately, I couldn't get the replay mod to work. I built the foundation of the building, but night was coming, so I decided to sleep. On day 2, I continued to build the house, finishing up with the foundation, then moving on to the walls. I added a waypoint to the house so I could find it again when I went off adventuring. My hunger bar was slowly going down, so I decided to plant a few crops. After planting some crops and bringing everything inside, it was back to the mines for me. I decided to make the tunnel a little bit wider and taller so it'd be easier to traverse. There was a ravine filled with water right next to my tunnel, so it was a little frustrating getting further down. I had to clear a fairly large area of water. As I made my way further down, the ambience became more and more ominous. I decided to make my way back to the surface and sleep for the night. Day 3 was back to the mines once again. I was determined to either find a cave or reach bedrock. I made my first iron pick and made a sword just in case. I stumbled upon an amethyst geode, which was pretty cool. Then I discovered a dripstone cave. This was a huge find for me, especially this early on. The dripping sounds here were really creepy. It was like I was in a horror movie. I kept going down into the cave, hoping it would open up and reveal some more resources. A skeleton shot me as I was climbing down. I immediately built a wall and healed up. I cheesed him just a little bit, but I wasn't quite ready to fight yet. I stood up on the wall that I had made to get a little bit of a better glimpse of the cave, and in the distance I spotted something. I saw what looked like diamonds. I needed to be better prepared to go down there first, so I returned to the surface to smelt up some iron. On day 4, I made some iron boots and a helmet. Then I headed back to the mine. I continued to mine any ores that I came across, but I kept those diamonds in the back of my mind. I saw an Enderman and debated killing him, but he seemed friendly enough, so I let him live, for now. I changed my brightness settings here so you guys don't have to strain your eyes. It's pretty dark down here. The atmosphere is oppressive as well. I keep hearing weird sounds coming from behind me, but nothing is ever there. A goblin jumped out at me out of nowhere. I don't think he was hostile, but I was paranoid and swung my pick without thinking. I continued to make my way towards the diamonds. And I finally mined my first diamonds. I managed to only get 2. I continued exploring the cave, hoping to find some more, but instead I came across something even better, a skeleton spawner. This could be useful in the future. I found some glow sticks and some rope in the chest. Oh, and look, more diamonds, 4 in total now. I decided I probably pushed my luck more than enough for one day, so I headed back to the surface. On day 5, I decided I had enough of the caves for now, so I decided to chop down some trees. I decided to make a spyglass because I was tired of not being able to zoom in. The mod that I usually use to zoom in has been discontinued for Fabric, so I'm stuck with the vanilla option. I finished the bits of my house that I had forgotten. I still need to work on the roof though, but at least the walls are mostly secure. Speaking of the roof, I built a stone cutter so I could begin working on the roof. I'm planning to use deep slate stairs, so it's back down to the mines once again. I wanted to explore the caves some more, mostly so I could light them up, but I ended up finding a good bit of resources. I also found a zombie spawner, which I didn't see right away, so a bunch of zombies spawned. I found some good loot in the chest, but not much to write home about. Day 5 bled into day 6, and I was still down in the mines. I found another spawner, this time another skeleton spawner, and I found a saddle in the chest. I continued exploring the caves, though I didn't find much, so I returned to the surface where it was raining pretty hard. The best time to build a roof is while it's raining, I guess, so I got to work. The rain in this pack sounds so crisp. Just listen to it for a while. On day 7, I woke up to a rainbow. It was a really nice sight and a little bit of foreshadowing. I continued working on the roof for a while. I didn't have the right blocks to finish the very top of the roof, so I decided to use basalt instead, which means I need to take another trip down to the mines, though I only needed to go to the amethyst geode. I finished the roof and placed some torches around the inside of the house. Next, I decided that the river was a little bit too far from my house, and I didn't want to walk all the way down there just to get food, so I started to work on a garden. It's a bit simple for now, but I revisit it a little bit later on. On day 8, I planted some flowers in the garden and accidentally bred some bees. I was starting to get an itch for adventure, but I needed a healthy supply of food first. Some raiders visited my garden. I tried to shoo them away, but they just stood there menacingly. So I took aim and fought them off. I continued working on the garden. The birds chirping in the background really made me feel at peace. I wanted to visit the village soon, but I had the exile debuff, so I had to find some cows to milk soon. I spent the rest of the day looking for cows without realizing that the yellow cows can also be milked. On day 9, I returned to the village. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but I was curious what kind of trades they had. When I was in the village last time, I only looked at a few of the trades, so this time I'm making sure to talk to everyone. I found a villager with a bone trade, trading bones for emeralds. Since I had access to a skeleton spawner, that could be a useful way to get emeralds. I returned home and planted some more carrots, and I also had found tomatoes and potatoes, so I planted those as well. I was beginning to get that itch for adventure again. In the morning, I want to explore the pillager outpost. But first, I wanted to build a better weapon. The bee stinger would be a fitting weapon, but sadly it would require a bee stinger. I decided to settle with a rapier. It has pretty quick attacks with lower damage, and I also made a shield. Day 10 was the day of the strike. The plan was simple: go in, loot everything. Come back with whatever richities were within. I used my spyglass to find any weak points. They had guards everywhere. Before I knew it, I was already fighting. They were a lot tougher than I thought they would be. The rapier's damage was not very good, so I had a tough time fighting them in a crowd. By the time I defeated the first group, reinforcements had already arrived. I got closer to the building, hoping to get some loot from the barrels. The only thing I got was a map to the woodland mansion. I was running out of food and health, so I decided to retreat for now. I ended day 10 gardening. On day 11, I decided that I wanted to be able to travel around a lot easier. I knew that there was a mod that added mounts, so I went looking around. I was hoping to at least find a horse, that way I could traverse the plains a bit better. I spent the entire day looking, but then... Oh, the shaders are making that lava look a little weird. Wait, is that lava? Hold on. No way. Isn't that one of the mounts? Yeah, I actually found what I was looking for. It took a while to figure out how to tame it. For some reason they can't be tamed when they're flying, and since it was hovering over the water, it was pretty much always flying. I tried to give it a platform so it might be able to sit, but it just kept flying around. I followed it around for a while, hoping it would land. I approached it cautiously. This time, I was finally able to ride it. It took a few attempts, but finally, it was mine. I went for my very first flight with her. I don't know if they actually have genders, but I started referring to her as a she, so that's what I'll be saying from now on. I also gave her a name right away, but I don't want to spoil it until I can actually use a name tag on her. Day 12 rolled around, and I went about trying to figure out how to get her to land. She just kept flying around and I couldn't quite reach her. So I had to look up how the mod works. Apparently, if you use a stick, you can change the mode that they're in, but since she was already flying, I couldn't reach her with the stick. Finally, after a few minutes, she landed on the roof of my house and I set her to sit mode. I cleared my inventory and decided to go for another flight. I was still getting used to the controls, so the footage may be a little wobbly. I found a pool of lava while flying and decided to gather up some obsidian. I headed back to the mines on day 13. I was wanting to explore some more, but I was still feeling weak while only wearing iron armor. This time I dug all the way down to bedrock to try to improve my chances of getting diamonds. I found diamonds almost immediately upon hitting bedrock level, so I'm glad I did it. I was now at 8 diamonds. I ended up finding a few more diamonds, totaling 12 now. And I found another one on my way back to the surface. On day 14, I returned to the surface and decided I wanted to make an enchanting table. Though I hadn't found any sugarcane yet, so I went out again. I wasn't paying attention and I accidentally hit the water, and I was kicked off of my mount. and she started flying around randomly. Looking back at the footage again, I realized that I accidentally put her into wandering mode. It took a while to get back on her, but lessons learned. I followed the nearby rivers, picking up as much sugarcane as I could. I returned home and planted the sugarcane. I didn't want to get too technical in this video, so I didn't make an automatic sugarcane farm. I created my enchanting table and put it in a nice spot in the house. I enchanted the rapier with unbreaking and created a diamond helmet and legs. I put some basic enchantments on them, and I also made some gold boots because I was planning on going to the Nether soon. I built and lit my Nether portal. I wasn't sure what to expect from the Nether, and I wasn't sure if I would return. I spawned in a really weird room. It had a Strider spawner in it. It could be useful for getting saddles later on. I mined some quartz and explored the nearby tunnels. The locals had names that I couldn't pronounce, but they didn't seem to mind me. I found some Cinsonite, which is the Nether's equivalent to iron. There were some weird firefly creatures here, but I spotted something even weirder in the distance. This is more like what I was expecting from a modded Nether. I started getting shot at by weird wither-looking creatures. Turns out, they're called Naga, and they're pretty dangerous. Fortunately, it didn't have a lot of health. I continued exploring for a bit when I came across a temple in the distance. I bridged across to it, anxious of what could be lying in wait for me. There wasn't much in here actually, just some zombie piglins. It had redstone contraptions that were similar to the jungle temples. The only useful thing I found here was some nether wart and some horse armor. I wanted to see if it would actually fit on the bird. After that, I decided to return home. It was nighttime and raining, so I went to bed. On day 16, I awoke to another rainbow. I put the armor on the Zar Patak. It looked pretty cool. I really wasn't sure what to do today. I was still waiting on my sugarcane to grow. So I flew around for a bit and explored. I was looking for more sugarcane so I wouldn't have to wait as long, but I didn't find as much as I did the first time, and it probably would have been faster to just wait for it to grow. But I did get some really nice views from the air while exploring. Towards the end of the day, I came across a lighthouse. I wanted to investigate it, but as soon as I approached it, I heard zombies from inside. I decided to come back the next day. On day 17, I expanded the sugarcane farm a bit. I started getting some torches and some food together to get ready to tackle the lighthouse. I entered tactically, taking the zombies out slowly and lighting up the spawners. The loot in this place was surprisingly good. I found my first name tag and a few music discs. The second floor was filled with spiders. Since it was daytime, I think most of them weren't even really interested in me. But the fourth floor was actually the easiest, surprisingly, and I found a notch apple. It was becoming nighttime, so the spiders were starting to attack me. And my sword broke, so I decided to leave the lighthouse for now. On day 18, I wanted to make an anvil. Now that I had a few name tags, I could finally name my mount. Unfortunately, though, I didn't have a lot of iron, so I went back to the mines. But first, I put the diamond horse armor on the mount, and it looked better than the gold armor. I gathered a good bit of iron and a few other resources and returned to the surface. It was already nighttime, so I started smelting the iron and went to sleep. Day 19, I was waiting for all of my iron to smelt, so I just watched the garden grow and relax for a while. It's always nice to be able to have an opportunity to take a breather every once in a while. The iron was done smelting, so I made the anvil. I put the name tag in and renamed it to Niji, using Japanese characters, which means rainbow. I thought the name was pretty fitting for the mount, because I thought it looked like Ho-Oh from Pokemon, which is the rainbow Pokemon. I also decided to create a new weapon. I made a broadsword, which is a larger and slower weapon than I was using previously, but it has a lot higher damage. I went to the mines for a while and found a few diamonds. I ended the day by fighting off a horde of zombies. The broadsword is way better than the rapier. Day 20, finally, a fifth of the way there. I decided to take it easy on day 20 and just mine for a while. I was running short on coal and I was tired of using logs, so I went around for a while exploring nearby caves. I woke up on day 21 and continued my task from the previous day. I was wanting to finish my enchanting setup, so I ran around killing cows for a while. On day 22, I was getting closer to finishing my enchanting table, so I harvested more sugarcane and killed more cows. I was flying around and I came across a villager trading post. These are pretty cool, they can give you some pretty rare items, though the chest loot is considerably better than the trades. Day 22 ended with even more grinding. On day 23, I went exploring some more. I think it was around this time that I realized I hadn't installed Oh the Biomes You'll Go. I was trying to find some new biomes and I kept getting the same few vanilla biomes. I fixed this a little bit later on. I kept flying around looking for sugarcane and cows. These last few days have been a little slow, but I'm just trying to get to a point where I'm a little less fragile. I decided that my garden was looking a little vanilla, so I looked into some building mods that we had installed. I got started building a fence around the garden, and I also built this little pen area that Niji could hopefully be safe in. I built her a more permanent home later on. On day 24, I continued building bookshelves. I was so close to having a full enchanting setup, but I was just 2 bookshelves off. I returned to the Nether in search of something very specific. If I wanted to become powerful, I would need to be fully enchanted. I needed an experience farm. I started day 25 off by collecting some kelp. This would be needed for the XP farm. I headed back to the mines, but this time I wasn't here for ore. I got to work on the XP farm. I'm sure you've all made one or at least seen one be made, so I won't bore you with the details. I honestly didn't even notice that day 26 had come by. I was still busy working on the farm. It was coming along quite nicely. I returned to the surface to get away from the oppressive background sounds. I also needed some signs, so there's that. I finished the XP farm and decided to go for a little bit of a test run. I made a little room around the killing chamber so I wouldn't be sneak attacked while AFK. Day 27 was spent mostly at the XP farm, finishing up the kill room and testing it to make sure it worked. It did. I was AFK for most of day 28. I ate some ice cream while gaining some XP. I hit level 33, which would give me enough wiggle room to hopefully get some good enchantments. I didn't want to spend too long AFKing. I enchanted my pick and got Fortune 2. I thought I could do better, so I disenchanted it and got Silk Touch instead. Getting Silk Touch was actually pretty huge because I planned on upgrading my sword to a Frost Slayer, which would require some packed ice. On day 29, I crafted the Frost Slayer. This was a menacing looking weapon and definitely served me well. It was enchanted automatically with Freezing 1, but I wasn't sure what that meant quite yet, so I tested it at the XP farm. Yeah, testing it at the XP farm was probably the worst place to test it because the enemies don't move, which means I didn't realize the effect was that it makes the enemies unable to move for a while. I ran around in the caves for a while and managed to grab quite a few diamonds. I was starting to feel pretty confident, but then I almost died to a creeper. A quiet reminder that I was, indeed, still mortal. I woke up on day 30 and mined the diamonds I had just gathered. I ended up with 5 more. It was another 10 days, so I decided to try my luck again. I went for another adventure. I came across this floating temple. It was really beautiful. I went inside and touched a book and quill that was sitting on a block of emeralds. I'm assuming something was supposed to happen, but my game just crashed. When I logged back in, the floor was missing. Honestly, if my game hadn't crashed there, I might have died. Thanks, Java. On day 31, I slept in a nearby village and returned to the castle. I was pretty cautious considering the first trap, so I ran around the outside lighting up some spawners. I had a good look around the place, but there wasn't much upstairs. It was pretty similar to the lighthouse actually, just a bunch of spawners and enemies that were pretty easy to take out. I headed back home with a good chunk of loot. On day 32, I decided to make a backpack. My inventory was constantly getting full during my adventures, so I thought it'd be nice to have somewhere to put some extra things. I went back to the mines, hoping for some more diamonds. I didn't find any, and I was getting hungry, so I went back to the Skelly farm and AFK'd for a bit. I was still AFK on day 33, and when I got back, it was already nighttime. On day 34, I enchanted my pick again and got Fortune 2 once again. That was definitely not worth the trade. I made some diamond boots and enchanted them. I had found a feather falling book a while back, so I decided to throw that on them as well. I went cave diving again, this time for some iron. I wanted to try out this fishing mod that was installed, so I created a fishing pole and planned to go out fishing the next day. The morning of day 35, I went out fishing. I built a fishing pier in the nearby river, but I kept getting attacked by lamprey, so I decided to find another spot. I knew there was an ocean to the south, so I flew Niji out there. I managed to almost immediately dig up a diamond crate, which are supposed to be pretty rare. I couldn't figure out how to open it though for the longest time. But when I did open it, it had some pretty good loot in it. I finished day 35 to a wonderful view of the sunset. I headed out to go fishing again on day 36. I wasn't quite sure how the loot tables worked in this mod, so I tried a few different places. Then I flew to another part of the ocean. I saw a ship in the distance. It had black sails, so I assumed it was hostile. I cautiously approached it. It was a skeleton crew. Literally, it was operated by strays. I spent a few minutes here, but the lower deck was pretty much full of monsters, so I decided to leave it for another day. I think day 37 was the day that I installed Biomes Aplenty. I went out exploring to see if I could find some new biomes. My audio quality glitched out here a lot, so unfortunately I'll have to mute the game sounds. I was wanting to start building a new home for Niji, so I started collecting hay bales. On day 38, I got started building a nest for Niji. It wasn't much to start with, but it was a nice place for me to land and park her whenever I came back. I went out to look for some spruce wood. I wanted to use spruce for the build, but I hadn't found any yet. Oh, the Biomes You'll Go adds some pretty cool trees. I found some redwood, but it wasn't the right color for what I wanted. I liked the look of the jacaranda wood, but wasn't sure if that was what I wanted to build with. I had a bit of a How to Train Your Dragon moment with some tall spires. On day 39, I settled for the jacaranda wood for the build. I actually ended up liking it quite a bit in the end, so I'm glad I went with it. I worked on the house, nest, perch for Niji for most of day 39. I went with dark oak for the roof, but I kinda regretted adding a roof later on. I spotted a black bear near my house. I guess it was a shiny. I decided to add a pathway to the top of the hill so I could get up there a little easier. On day 40, I continued working on the path. I went around the house, sprucing things up a bit and cleaning up some bits that I thought looked a little weird. Not much else happened on day 40, it was just a quiet day at home. On day 41, I planted a new sugarcane patch in my garden. I'm not quite sure why, I guess I was just trying to continue organizing things. I also made the garden look a little bit nicer in general. I ended the day at the XP farm. On day 42, I returned to the village hoping to trade some bones. Unfortunately, the villager lost his trade and wouldn't get the job again. I built a campfire so I could harvest the beehives without disturbing the bees. I ran around for a while and picked up a few beehives and added them to the garden. Most of them were already pretty close by, but I wanted them to be inside the garden. I needed sand for some glass, so on day 43, I returned to the lighthouse and gathered some up. I stopped at the top of the lighthouse to see if I missed anything. I just grabbed a few of these redstone lamps. I also found a buried treasure map, so I went searching for some treasure. I don't know why, but I couldn't find where this stupid chest was. I had a hard time seeing the map, so it made it even more difficult. I spent way too long trying to find it, but eventually I did. And there was actually a Heart of the Sea in there. On day 44, I started smelting my glass. I was wanting to create bottles so I could collect some honey. I looked into how to get a summoning stick for my mount. I was tired of having to find it every time I wanted to go somewhere. Unfortunately though, it would require an ender pearl. I flew around for a while. I was looking to find a new mount, but I hadn't quite decided on which one yet, so I just flew in a random direction. For some reason, I also decided to tame every single dog that I came across. I ended up with like 5 dogs following me. On day 45, I made up my mind about which mount I wanted, but in order to get it, I would need to find a colder biome. I explored for a while and came across the frozen tundra. There was a nice temple here, but it was filled with Vex, so I ran in the opposite direction. I wandered the frozen wastes for what seemed like forever. At the end of day 45, I still had not found it. Day 46 rolled by, and I had already walked for miles. My feet were numb with cold. I came across a field of frozen pikes. This wasn't quite what I was looking for though, so I continued on. I found a feral wolf, close but not quite what I was looking for. The sound of the winds blowing and the crows cawing made me begin to lose hope. I continued my search on day 47. I looked it up and I was searching for a very, very specific biome. With Oh the Biomes You'll Go installed, it made it even more difficult to find it. I continued searching for the rest of the day. I came across a village and decided to rest for the night. I woke up on day 48, all rested up, and I returned to the search. The boars in this area seem to be more violent than back home. Considering I lost 2 previous attempts to boars, I stayed cautious. On day 49, I was helping my dog fight a boar. I knew the dog didn't have a lot of health, so I tried to protect it. What I didn't know though, is this moment would be the worst decision I've made in this entire run. In the distance, I heard the sounds of a boar dying. But I couldn't find Niji. Usually he would have teleported to me by now. Panic began to set in. I searched the area, but the only thing I found was a saddle and diamond horse armor. At this point, I knew what had happened, but I was just too afraid to admit it. Niji wasn't at full health, she had just been fighting a boar. I got distracted and another boar must have come at her and killed her. The pain was hard to bear, but I had more problems to worry about now. With Niji dead, I had no way back home. I was over 5,000 blocks away from home. At this point, I had to make a decision. Either I stay here, looking for a new mount, or I head back home to regroup and bury my friend. I decided to go home. Day 50 rolled around, and I was by myself in the middle of the frozen tundra. I made the long trek back home. Towards the end of day 50, something happened. Oh, hello. Nice. Let's go, friend. Later, I would name it Seishin, or Spirit, because it was like the spirit of Niji was pushing me to continue on. Now, with a new ground mount, the trek back home wouldn't be as hard. I stayed at a village that night. On day 51, I was still 3,000 blocks away from home. The journey was long, but with the help of Seishin, it wasn't that bad. I made it back home that night. Day 52 gave me time to grieve. I built a gravestone for Niji. A new, darker era was about to begin in my world. The enemies became harder, and I felt weaker without the ability to fly. Not to mention, the pillagers became more and more of a menace. On day 53, I built a small den for Seishin next to the perch. I figured he would like a dark and cool place to live. I gave Seishin a name tag and let him rest in the den. I wanted to make a summoning stick, so I ran around killing chickens for feathers. I built the stick and figured out how to use it. I noticed a creeper in the distance, so I went to kill it. It had more health than usual. I had just installed another difficulty mod into the pack. I was feeling like regular enemies weren't really doing all that much to me, and I was killing them a little bit too easily. Enemies should now be scaled with time and distance traveled. You might also notice throughout the video I make tweaks to the currently installed mods. Whenever I felt like something wasn't feeling right, I tried to resolve it so the game felt a little bit more difficult but also more balanced. On day 54, I was feeling really disorganized. None of my chests had any sort of organization, so I decided to build a storage building. On day 55, I continued building. I had most of the framework built. I wanted it to have a little bit more depth, so I added some extra logs to the side and on the entrance. I was visited by some pillagers. The pillages were starting to become more and more of a problem. I continued working on the roof on day 56. I swear every time I build a roof in this video, it starts raining. I finished the roof on the night of day 56. On day 57, I started filling the storage building with chests. I needed leather for item frames, so I went out on station. Day 58 was moving day. I grabbed all of the items from my chest in the house and organized them into the storage building. It felt nice to actually have a place for my things, rather than making a new chest every time I filled up the previous one with random junk. I also had a lot less items than I thought I did, but due to the disorganization, it felt like I had a lot more. I continued moving things way into day 59. I'm not sure what I did on day 60. I only have a 50-second long clip from that day of me looking at chests. I think I was wanting to enchant a new bow, so I think I was in the Skelly farm for most of the day. On day 61, I enchanted my new bow. I got really lucky with Unbreaking 3 and Flame. I enchanted a second bow that I had laying around and got Infinity. And a third bow got me Power 4. Overall, a pretty good bow. I also saw my first Harvest Moon. I had recently installed a mod that adds Harvest Moons and Blood Moons, so I was glad when I noticed I hadn't harvested my crops in a while. I was beginning to miss the ability to fly, so on day 62 I took Seishin out on an adventure. I didn't notice until editing, but Seishin had gained a lot of health. I'm not sure if it was the difficulty mod that changed it, or if it was a mechanic of the Mythic Mounts mod. I wandered around for quite a while. I continued wandering for most of day 63. I don't remember exactly which mount I was going after, but I think I was looking into an Archelon, basically a sea turtle, which would hopefully allow me to travel across the water easier. I was also looking for a giant moth, which would allow me to fly again, though I don't think it can do it as well as a Zartak. This might sound a bit grim, but a small part of me was kind of glad that I lost Niji, as it allowed me to explore on foot again. The danger felt way more real. I found this pretty cool forest with glowing tree leaves. I couldn't get any saplings though. I also almost died to a piranha. On day 64, I continued my travels by boat. I left Seishin on the shores. I regretted this later on because I didn't know that the mount needs to be in a chunk-loaded area to be summoned, so I had to come back to find him again later. The biome I was looking for was a deep, lukewarm ocean. This was the only biome that an Archelon could spawn in. Day 65 rolled around, and I still hadn't found a deep, lukewarm ocean. As I ventured out, the biomes around me continued to get warmer, but the water stayed as a regular ocean. I saw some axolotls swimming around. I would have grabbed one if I had brought a bucket with me. I saw another pirate ship. This time it was floating just above an ocean monument. After adventuring for a while longer, I decided to head back home. I found a ghost cloak in a chest. It's pretty cool. I can activate it to give myself a brief amount of invisibility. I tried summoning Seishin, but it wouldn't work. At the time, I thought maybe he had died as well. I returned home on day 66 and immediately went out on another adventure. I wanted to see if I could find the right biome for the Archelon. I found the right biome, but I just couldn't find any. Supposedly they're supposed to float on the surface, but I also checked under the water just in case. I almost died to a blue-ringed octopus on day 67. I continued searching, but these waters belonged to the sharks. I decided to head to shore. If I couldn't find a sea turtle, then I'd look for a giant moth. The only biome giant moths can spawn in are dark oak forests. Fortunately, there was one nearby. Day 68 rolled around and I was still searching. On day nice, I continued searching. I'm not sure what the Mythic Mount mod considers common, but there wasn't a single moth in this forest. I decided to return home on day 70. I was frustrated that I couldn't find any mounts. I'm not sure if the mod was bugging out or if another mod was interfering with it or something, but I just couldn't seem to find anything. On day 71, I returned to the north. All this walking around made me miss Seishin, so I went to retrieve him again. I was walking through a forest and came across a courier bird. Finally, a new mount. They're ground mounts only though, so my situation wasn't much improved. It was short-lived though, as a couple of boars jumped it. These boars are actually evil. This was the second mount that they've taken from me. At this point, I just wanted to get Seishin back and get back home. I found Seishin and slept through the night. I made my way back home on day 72. I was crossing a river with Seishin when he started getting attacked by something. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on. I had to do something. No, 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 not again. No, please. It was a lamprey that had gotten stuck to Seishin. I attacked it, but ended up hitting him. He was mad at me and wouldn't let me ride him again. But at least he was alive. I set him to follow mode and continued heading home. I was walking and saw something in the distance. It was another Zartak. I panicked and wasn't sure if I was recording, so I hit the record button again and accidentally skipped taming it. Oops. But now I could fly again. These last few days have been hard, so it was nice to have a little bit of luck again. But my luck would soon get even better. I rode my new bird back home and decided to run back to get Seishin. I kept trying to summon him so I wouldn't have to walk as far. I found Seishin once again, and I was actually able to ride him. His health was still low, so I was being really careful. I was riding back home when I encountered yet another Zartak. These things are considered rare, but I've found 3 now. What is my luck? I can't find a common bug, but I can find 3 rare birds. I didn't bring an extra saddle with me, so I rode Seishin back and had the bird follow me back. Finally, Seishin was back home. It felt good being back home. Plus, I had a couple new birds. At the end of the day, I upgraded my iron chestplate to an emerald one. On day 74, I made a gravestone for the random chocobo that died earlier. I hadn't named it yet, and I didn't have enough time to get emotionally attached to it. I looked into the magic mod called Arcanus. Arcanus? Nope. Not calling it that. I looked into the magic mod Arcanus. It had been installed since the beginning, but I just couldn't figure it out. As it turns out, I needed a wand. I used the Solar Strike spell, and it took half of my health. Yeah, this mod might be a bit too dangerous for me to use for now. I looked up how to breed the Zartak. Turns out I just needed golden apples, which are easy enough to come by. They made a baby, and I was finally comfortable enough to fly again. I didn't want a repeat of the Niji situation, so I wanted some backups. I named my new Zartak Nico, which means sunshine, Kumo, which means cloud, and their baby Ame, which means rain. I was trying to keep with the name theming with Niji. I apologize if I mispronounce any of these names, by the way. I'm a dumb American. On day 75, I decided the nest was way too small to fit all of these birds, so I started the expansion. I dug away more of the cliff and cut down a few jacaranda trees. I needed some more dark oak, so I went for a quick jaunt to the dark oak forest on Nico. I continued working on the upgrade overnight. On day 76, I made some pretty good progress on the new perch. I made the old perch into a sort of landing pad, which I could then drive the birds into basically an underground parking garage. I dug into the cliff a good ways back. I wanted to have room for expansion, just in case I found any more, or decided to breed some more. On day 77, I continued working on the perch. I was glad to be home and working on a new build, so I just went to town on this. The decorative blocks mod adds these lattices, which look pretty good here. I used F3 and B to figure out how big these birds were. I honestly thought they were a lot bigger. I still ended up giving them pretty big individual pens. I needed hay bales for each of the pens, so on day 78 I went out for a while. Ame had just grown up a day or two ago, so I decided to take her for a test run. I found out a bit later that her health was 74, almost double that of her parents. She was an absolute tank. I visited nearby villages and abandoned farms, harvesting every bit of wheat I could get. I returned home and finished the floors of the pens. On day 79, I put up some gates in front of the pens. I wanted to also figure out a unique light source for this area. I didn't realize that I had chipped in this pack, so I went about building the workbenches for it. I needed the Tinkerer's workbench to make lanterns. I thought these lanterns looked nice. Next, I wanted a nice mix of cobblestone for the walls, so I needed to make a mason's workbench. I hadn't actually gotten any clay yet in this series, so on day 80 I went down to the river and got some. I didn't realize I needed both a brick and clay, and accidentally cooked up all the clay. I heard some pillagers near my storage building, but I couldn't see them. They must be planning something. I did some more detailing. I'm not usually a fan of pink wood, but jacaranda looks really good for a build like this. I realized my previous mistake and went out looking for some more clay. While I was out, I saw this big lizard guy. He seemed friendly, so I tried to ride him. I didn't have a saddle, so I came back for him a little bit later on. I also realized now that I forgot to name him, so if you have a suggestion, leave a comment down below. I ended the day by putting all the burbs in their pens. On day 81, I textured the walls in the pens. At this point, I was pretty much done with the perch. Overall, I think it turned out pretty well, but I think I might have spent a little bit too much time on it. I decided I had been home for too long, so I went out on a short cave diving mission to get some coal and iron. I was out exploring when I overheard some pillagers saying the pillager captains were planning an attack on the village. They said they would be gathering as many pillagers as they could over the next 20 days. I met with the village chiefs to decide what to do next. They didn't believe me. They said they couldn't trust me. I was still an outsider. So, I decided to improve both my standing in the village and everyone's chances of surviving. On day 82, I set up a shop. I wanted to sell enchanted books, so I hired a couple of employees and trained them. Villagers are a bit thick in the skull, but fortunately it didn't take them long to understand. I spent the rest of day 82 resetting trades. Day 83, the customers kept trying to steal my employees' jobs. I had to replace the roof so they would stop tracking to it. One of my employees learned how to make mending books. This would be huge, especially since my sword was really close to breaking. I decided to install the mod that lets me refresh villager trades faster. This might be a controversial addition, but it's really inconvenient for no reason in vanilla Minecraft. I continued refreshing trades on day 84. My other employee learned Unbreaking 3 after a lot of resets. With my shop fully stocked, my next stop was to improve the economy. I set up a bunch of composters around and made sure almost every villager was a farmer and able to trade carrots and potatoes. I continued selling carrots to the villagers to get more and more emeralds. I decided my nights would be best spent in the XP farm, so over the next few days, that's what I did. I continued trading on day 85. With access to nearly infinite bone meal, growing more carrots was pretty easy. I made a clock so I could track the time more accurately. I was trying to use my time as efficiently as possible. I ran around collecting wool. I planned on restructuring the village housing by building more beds. This would allow more villagers to move in and encourage them to create more workers. And place beds all around the village. On day 87, it was starting to become like a routine. In the mornings, I would grow carrots. In the afternoons, I would trade carrots. And at night, I would grind XP. I decided I wanted to upgrade my sword. I wanted to put sharpness 5 on it, but the only way to do that was to get another librarian. On day 88, I hired my new employee and went about training them. It didn't take long for them to learn how to make sharpness 5 books. Adding sharpness 5 made the tooltip glitch out a bit, but I finally had a really good weapon. I continued trading. I wanted to build a waystone which would let me instantly travel between 2 points in space. However, they required ender pearls and endermen are really difficult in this mod pack. Due to scaling, they currently had 80 health points and were doing about 50% of my health per hit. I hadn't slept in a few days, so I got attacked by phantoms. I decided to take a look around the nether to see if I could find some endermen. I found a couple right away, but unfortunately neither of them dropped an ender pearl. Day 89 came around, and I was still in the nether. I found my first fortress. I was expecting the wither skeletons to be a lot stronger, but they weren't too bad. I guess mobs in the nether don't scale up. I found my first blaze rod and walked right past a wither skeleton skull. Fortunately, I came back through and picked it up. Crazy how fast I got one. I think that was only the first or second wither skeleton I killed. I moved on from the fortress and came across some nether bats. These guys are hostile, but you can tame them. I wasn't planning on taming one, but it kept attacking me. I went back to my portal to get a saddle. Flying another bat around would make this a lot easier and would allow me to explore more difficult terrain. On day 90, I was still flying around in the Nether. The Ender Pearl situation still wasn't looking too good. I hadn't seen a single Enderman in here. I'm not sure if the better Nether mod replaces warped forests, or just makes them rarer. I found a weird tower filled with piglins. It had wither skeleton skulls outside it, so I took them. I returned to the overworld and ended the day at the XP farm. I met with the villager chiefs once again. They were grateful to me for improving their village. They invited me to join them on the council. I declined their offer. I wasn't sure if I was going to be staying in the area for long. I explained that I just wanted to help them defend themselves against the pillagers. They accepted my offer. On day 91, I wanted to get more mending and unbreaking books, but I needed leather for more books, so I went for a quick cow killing spree. At this point, I probably should have already made a leather farm. I farmed for emeralds for a while. I was still optimizing my time, so I hadn't slept in a while. The phantoms were starting to become a problem, so I slept. On the morning of day 92, I traded some more carrots. I was really close to getting to level 30, so I spent most of day 92 at the XP farm. I returned to the mines that night. I wanted to create a diamond chestplate. I ended up getting way more diamonds in a single trip than I did over the last 90 days. My luck so far has been really hit or miss. I either get really lucky or really unlucky. Morning was approaching, so I headed back to the surface. I had managed to get 20 diamond ores, so on day 93, I fortuned them into 38. I built my new chestplate, but I needed XP to enchant it, so I returned to the XP farm. On day 94, I enchanted the diamond chestplate. I got protection 4 and unbreaking 3. Not bad. I also enchanted a new diamond helmet and combined it with the one I was already wearing. I wanted to test out my new equipment, so I took a visit to the local pillager outpost. I killed a few pillagers in the hopes of weakening their forces, even a little bit. I also made a new shield. On day 95, I started building defenses for the village. I modified the well at the town square into a defensible tower. I added pathways between the roofs of the houses and built barricades into the roofs. I locked the village down. This was a bit of an authoritarian decision, but it would save their lives. On day 96, I continued working on fortifications. I decided to hide Kumo in a nearby hill as a sort of an emergency exit. If the village got overrun and I wasn't able to get to Ame, I would still be able to get away. I didn't tell the villager chiefs about this. Day 97, I was still finalizing the fortifications in the village. I knew the raid would happen soon. I ran around making sure every point had enough protection to be able to hide from anyone shooting arrows. On day 98, I decided to set up sandbags around the village on the ground, so the guards and iron golems could have some protection as well. I paid another visit to the outpost. I wanted to gather any info I could get. This was the first time I actually went inside the outpost. I quickly became overwhelmed. I think in doing this, I made the pillagers act much quicker, because on day 99, the raid started. I arrived in the village just in time. The first wave came immediately. It was a frontal attack, most likely a scouting party. The next wave came. I picked them off easily enough from the rooftops. The third wave tried a stealthier approach. I guess they were trying to burrow up into the village because I found the last 2 pillagers in a cave. The next wave came quick. They got into the village much faster than the previous waves. This time they also had witches. I was poisoned, but the wave was done. The next wave came from behind. This time they had a Ravager rider. I focused the Ravager while the Iron Golems helped handle the others. One of the enemies dropped a Totem of Undying, so I equipped it. The next wave came, and it was much harder than the last. They had an Evoker who could summon Vex. The Vex's damage was scaled up significantly and caused me to eat my Notch Apple. The Vex were very difficult to deal with. It was becoming nighttime, so the undead were also beginning to attack. The final wave was about to happen. They had several Ravager riders this time, one of which was an Evoker. He stayed back and continuously summoned Vex. I had to fly back to the house and create more golden apples. The Vex followed me and popped my Totem of Undying, way too close of a call. I made the apples and returned to the battlefield. I was being followed around by Vex, so I stayed on my mount. Sorry if it gets a little bit hard to see what's going on here. I couldn't stay in one spot for fear of death. I needed to find the source of all of these Vex. I flew around trying to pick off the last remaining Ravagers. The raid lasted throughout the night, and day 100 came. The wave was almost over, but I was still being targeted by the Vex. I had to get off my mount and was stuck on the ground. I was being chased by a pillager, but he got stuck in a cobweb. I finally found the Evoker and took him out. I finally defeated the raid. There were a few Vex remaining, but they mostly all ran away. As I wandered the village looking for any pillagers that might have remained, I realized it had already been 100 days since I awoke in this world. I still wasn't sure why I was here, but I knew that the people here were grateful. I returned to the outpost and decided to burn it down. It was too dangerous to allow the pillagers to remain this close to my home and to the village. I watched it burn from a distance, and picked off any pillagers that attempted to flee. As the sun set, I flew into their horizon. I needed a break from all of this conflict. I wasn't sure if I would come back or not. But one thing I do know, though, is that this isn't over.